What we're talking about here is the role of the board in organizational culture and being proactive leaders in that. And so we want to start by explaining what we see in this moment of time and why we see this moment as one of the greatest cultural transformation opportunities and threats of our lifetime. And so we're seeing pressure in 4 areas that are having a dramatic impact on our culture. And the first one is about our health. We're living through a global pandemic, we all know that. And this has brought with it social isolation, threats to our personal health and that of our loved ones. For some, they've lost family members and not even been afforded an opportunity to be with them, to say goodbye to them, or even mourn them in a way that they would have been accustomed to. The second one is about our money. Because of the global pandemic, many are facing significant financial hardship. They've lost jobs, their livelihood. They've gone through their savings, they've dipped into retirement accounts, they've racked up debt in order to make ends meet, and they fear a prolonged global recession with no end in sight. The third is about personal security. We're seeing protests in the street, some violent, some not. This threatens one's sense of stability and security. And then add to that a growing fear of those who are supposed to protect us, as media plays violent encounters with police over and over again. And, you know, I'll just tell you a quick story about this. I have a friend, he's a man of color. He grew up in Texas, and he's in his 60s now. He's my age. There, I gave that one away. Anyway, he's in his 60s, and 40 years ago, he was driving his car and he was pulled over by 4 white police officers who he was going about 3 miles an hour over the speed limit. They pulled him over for it, pulled him out of the car, beat him terribly, and told him never to come to that part of town again. And so now, every time he sees these stories, he's traumatized them. Every time the media plays it, he's traumatized by it. And he's not the only one. There's literally thousands upon thousands of people who are traumatized by this and are concerned about personal security. The fourth is about our personal identity. And as our collective consciousness grows in our awareness of the racial injustices there are in this world, people are being challenged at their very core, at the deepest level of their identity. You know, if I'm a person of color, I want justice. I want to be treated justly and fairly. I matter. And I will scream it to the rooftops if I have to. Black Lives Matter. And if you're white, you're rethinking your own views on racial injustice. You may even be thinking, I didn't think I was a racist. In fact, I was certain I didn't have a racist bone in my body. But now you might be questioning that. And now you may even be saying, oh my goodness, I'm a racist. Now what do I do? And so these 4 significant pressures are bearing in on each other simultaneously. And right there in the middle of this is you and me, and people just like us. And just one of these global drivers of culture is enough to put stress on a person, let alone 4 of them happening simultaneously. So I want to let's take a look at this through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for those of you unfamiliar with this, and I'm sure most of you are, but this is a theory in psychology proposed by a guy by the name of Abraham Maslow. And he wrote in 1943, he wrote a paper called A Theory of Human Motivation. And the basic theory is that in order for motivation to arise to the next stage, each stage has to be satisfied within the individual themselves. So before someone can feel safe, this bottom level, they must have first had their physiological needs met. In order for someone to feel love, they must first feel safe. In order for someone to have self-esteem, they must first feel loved. In order for someone to become self-actualized and be all that they can be, they must first have esteem. And so the original hierarchy, Maslow's original theory said that a lower level must be completely satisfied and fulfilled before you can move on to a higher pursuit. Well, today's scholars prefer to think of these levels as continuously overlapping each other. And this means that the lower levels, they may take precedence back over the other levels at any point in time. And this is what we're seeing. The point is this: many people like you and me are being threatened at the very lowest levels of this hierarchy. We're being pushed down this hierarchy of needs. And many people can no longer pay their rent. They've been pushed down to that lowest level. They're worried about shelter and sheltering their families. Others haven't had significant financial change. They're still working, whatever, the CERB is taking care of them, but they're concerned about the pandemic and their health. Still others are feeling this new sense of isolation they haven't had before. They can't see or be with friends or family due to the lockdown. And some are feeling disrespected as they watch news reports of the injustices to people of color and Indigenous peoples. They're being traumatized with every media report. And many of them just can't reach a level of self-actualization for some or all of these reasons. And again, there's this pressure is pushing people down the hierarchy. So now, we as board members, we can't solve all of the problems that macro cultural change and pressure is putting on people all around the world. We can't do that. It's way too big. But as board members, we can examine that small microculture that we're responsible for, the organization, and we can lead through the impacts on it. And so that's why we called this session, if you're not leading your culture's leading you. And it isn't just me who thinks this. Here's what Edgar Schein, he's the father of modern thinking on organizational culture. I mean, anybody who's written anything on organizational culture did it on the shoulders of Edgar Schein. And he says the only real thing of real importance that leaders do is create and manage culture. Now, yesterday we presented a free live Zoom event on the impacts of culture in the boardroom, and some of you were there. We had about 180 people taking part, and we asked this group a couple of questions. And the results are really quite stunning. So first we asked, to what extent has your own way of thinking changed in the last 3 months? Now, if you add this up, 79% had changed. Their thinking had changed from one extent to another, some positive, some negative, but 79%, their thinking has changed. That's stunning. If we were to extrapolate that out to the population of Canada, that would be almost 30 million people who've changed their thinking about something in the last 3 months. That's stunning to me. Then we asked, to what extent do you expect your organization's culture to change in the immediate future? And this one, a full 89% said their organizational culture would change from one extent to another, either positive or negative, but again, a stunning number, 89%. So if you think about your organization, just think about this for a moment. If 79% of your employees now think differently, and 89% of the organizations represented here, 89% of your organizations are experiencing culture change in some way right now, how important do you think it is to pay attention to ensuring effective leadership of organizational culture? And again, like David said, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. But did you know that at the best of times, the average CEO spends 16% of their time focused on cultural transformation efforts? So if the CEO is the board's one employee, let's think this through. If the CEO's the board's one employee and they're spending 16% of their time in a given area, how important do you think it would be for the board to pay attention to the effectiveness of that cultural leadership? So I think we all get the picture here. There's pressure from all sides affecting virtually everyone around us included, you included, and board members have a responsibility to lead in protecting and nurturing organizational culture. And if that's not enough, I have one more slide to show you on this. And this is a quote from the NACD. And the NACD is the National Association of Corporate Directors in the US. And it says that oversight of corporate culture should be among the top governance imperatives for every board, regardless of its size and sector. So it's not just me, it's not just Eggershine saying that this is an important thing to do, but we have the NACD saying that any board of any size in any sector should make this a top governance imperative.